Hi, it's Kevin here. I've got another video. This time I want to take a look at working with objects, presentation side. So creating objects, instantiating objects, and of course accessing instance variables and shared variables. So I've got this simple little payroll form here. All it does is it accepts the name, employee name, the hours they worked, the rate. It's got to calculate, which when I click it will actually end up instantiating an object of the payroll class and then accessing the properties through that object to get me total calculated pay for that employee. I've also got this summary form here, which will, when I call upon it, it will actually show the total number of employees processed, the overtime hours, total overtime hours, and total payroll. Those are all those shared variables. So just to revisit here before I run this, I've got my payroll class. Here's all my private instance variables. And there's all my shared class variables. I go down here, I've got a couple constructors, and of course it's only through the constructor can I actually get access to these property procedures, and it's those property procedures that directly affect those instance variables. So I've got my constructor that takes two parameters, and then I've got my default empty constructor. The parameterized constructor, in addition to calling those two property procedures to set hours and rate, also calls my find pay method, which actually calculates pay and any overtime pay as necessary. So let's just give this a run here and just see how this goes. So I've got name, I'll throw in a name. There's absolutely no presentation validation on the name, I should say. Hours and rate simply has to be entered, has to be greater than 0. So hours, I'll put in 20 hours at $16. There we go, $320 is the total pay. So I can clear this, I can exit. I'm going to clear and put in another name and another set of hours. This time we've got somebody that put in a little bit more time, makes a little bit more money. $950 is the total pay. We'll take a look at summary. What summary does is bring up the second form, which actually shows me the contents, or shows me the values stored in all of those shared class variables. So the total number processed, the total overtime hours with one decimal place, and the total payroll formatted as currency. And that, of course, is a modal form. I can't get away from here without explicitly closing that thing. So I want to take a look code side at what's going on here. So payroll form, I've got a pay object that I've declared. I've got a couple local variables for input hours and input rate. I attempt to parse it if it's greater than 0, which two birds, one stone, it's hours greater than 0, and it's actually a number. I go ahead and try to parse the rate. Once that's all good, I instantiate my payroll object. So my pay object earlier declared, instantiated using the parameterized constructor. Once I've created that object, it's got an accessible pay. So I go lbl pay display.text equals the name of my object, the pay property, which is a read-only property, and I format it as currency to string. I'm going to scroll down here to my call to summary. So all I do in my call to summary is show the thing, and of course I'm showing it dialog so that it is in fact modal. And then on the summary side, I've declared a payroll object, but when you're accessing class level variables, so shared variables, if you think about it, it's shared among all objects of the class. The only way to get at this is through the class name. Well, of course, being VB, they don't quite take that harsh a stand. They say the best way to get at this is through the class name. If you want to access it through an object, that's fine. I've got object count display.text equals my object name, and I'm trying to get to number processed, which is one of those shared read-only properties. And I'm getting a warning here: access of a shared member constant enum, etc., through an instance qualifying expression will not be evaluated. It is just a warning, though. This will actually compile and run. It could persist with that warning, and what in fact it will do, it'll say you don't want that object, you want us to actually go to the class that that object is instantiated of. The next two I've actually used just the name of the class, and you'll see there's no warning there. So overtime display, I'm using payroll. It's the same thing here for payroll display for total payroll. I'm just accessing the class itself to get to that total pay. We'll just move this aside. Taking a look at declaring objects, this picks up from the last video. Like many things in VB, like many things with C# or VB, you can declare and instantiate separately. And in the case of these objects that we've overloaded the constructor, you can use either one. In terms of accessing object properties versus shared properties, we can take a look at instance properties directly through the object name. Shared, it's a little bit different. The desired method is to access those properties through the class name. I've included a link here to the MSDN library page on shared properties and accessing shared properties. And you can do a little bit more reading up on it there if you like.